Yo, yo.
Yo, what's going on, dude?
Hey, how are you?
Nice. I'm doing well. How are you?
Good. Sorry, came in just under the wire.
No, no, no. All good. I had this recording. So the idea is we'll just basically just treat this as a post-race chat and
Okay.
get it shared as a video and maybe even just like a podcast within the squad for other people to learn from.
Okay. Cool.
And we'll basically just sort of chat off the cuff here on how the race went, your intentions in it, what you learned. We've got good stuff from your pre-race nutrition plan. Um, And then, really, like the main reason that I want to do this is because you have basically lived out the blueprint on how to come in and execute a 5 hour half Ironman in roughly 6 months' time. And so I sort of want to call that out for people on what it takes to achieve that and where you came in, what kind of averages you've been having in terms of training time and stuff like that. And other than that, we'll just let it roll.
Cool.
Okay, so to lay the scene here, you started on May 1. We had basically May, June, July, August, September. So essentially 5 months. And then you did your first 70.3 and just came in at 5:15. Smoking fast time, really complete race. Um, Give us just like your first pieces of feedback from how the race went and where your expectations were and how it all unfolded for you.
From a standpoint of what my goal was I'll give you kind of the weeks leading up to it. All along my goal was to, and still is, to get to a full Ironman. And kind of coming up over the last few months, I felt really strong just because of the training plan that had been outlined and how I was feeling that the idea of a 70.3 before the end of the year trickled into my head of, is that possible? I reached out to you and you said, yeah, dude, absolutely. Muncie's, there's going to be some guys there. That's a good target. So kind of fast forward to the race itself, same goals, get out there, execute and finish. But leading up to it, I think you and I both realized that there needed to be some time goals as well. I'd done a good job of building to a point where I think just finishing is still absolutely something to be incredibly proud of. But I built myself to a point of, I think there needs to be a time iteration, short of something going massively wrong, sickness or blowing a tire. So initially in my head I have it as 6 hours, and you and I talked and you said, no way, man, five and a half, 5.5 for you. Um, and so going in, that was my goal, that 5.5. And um, from a race standpoint, really, we talked about this a little bit. It's very rare that I go into a really big event feeling fully prepared. Sometimes it's 95%, sometimes it's 90%, sometimes it's not prepared at all. And I've gotten um, probably more used to than I should, and it's bit me in a few times, but more used to than I should going into big situations unprepared and managing to get out of them. And I couldn't be more thankful just lining up morning of in the swim, just like feeling like it was there. I just needed to go through the motions, and that in my head, 5.5 hours or less, I was going to be crossing the finish line. And not to put away with the sprint and the Olympic that I finished, because those were huge building blocks to getting me to the finish. But having like that first Ironman banner behind me in the post race, like it was real. It's a real sanctioned Ironman event, and I can kind of wear that badge throughout. So I couldn't have felt more comfortable race morning, and then the race itself. Um, I I pretty much followed exactly what we planned until the run, and the run was an area that I felt comfortable, and it was also the area where things went off the rails for me a little bit in terms of how I was feeling. I wasn't, throughout the swim, throughout the bike, it was great. Let's do this all day long. Um, the early parts of the run, I didn't feel like that anymore. And it was, the little bit of doubt that was out there started to creep into my mind a little bit, but fought through it. We had a really good plan. And overall, like the day for me was just incredible. I mean, I'm still, here we are 3 days later or 4 days later, and I'm still kind of riding the high of it.
Sweet, dude. Yeah. So we've had a couple other guys on the squad get down around 5 hours. I think that Rin just did 5:02. Brian Riley has done something right around five, maybe 5:07. But both of those guys had come in, like Rin had come in as a 20-year soccer player, and Brian Riley had come in with a lot of really good swim experience. So, really, what I love about just like your development is that you are the first person that came to me saying, I want to get to Ironman, but I have no swim and bike experience, and I want to progress from sprint to Olympic to 70.3 to full. So really what unfolded is I was like, okay, well, we've got a ton of time. We can be patient and really be process driven. And lo and behold, you start buying into the process and the progress comes way faster than expected. So we didn't even really expect for you to be doing a 70.3 this year necessarily until you really got into the summer, right? A couple months
Yep.
into training.
Yep.
But I think that like one of the big things that set you up for success in this race were the races that you did leading up to this. So we talked about you did the sprint, you did the Olympic, and then I think very important is that 1 mile open water swim race that you pieced in while you were on vacation. I think it was in Cape Cod. And so as people are like learning from this and they're trying to figure out how can I get down there at that 5 hour time, right? Getting those race reps is just super valuable for understanding just the logistics, right? The full orientation of a try. And then when you toe the line of a bigger race and a 70.3 you really want to ball out on, it can be much more about executing on the plan that we set. As for your times, I'm going to share my screen here in a bit and dive into your training peaks. But generally speaking, you were right under 40 minutes for the swim. You were just over 21 miles an hour on the bike, and then just over 8-minute miles on the run, right? And
Yeah.
4 and 3 minute transitions.
Yes.
Yeah. So just like super solid and steady throughout. Not really any like huge outlier of this one sport was way better than the others and this one was way lacking. It was like the whole race was really steady. I want to talk to you a little bit more about just like your execution of workouts and following intervals and following workout structure, because I feel like that's something that is a huge strength of yours. And as people are trying to develop, right, and stay in this longer and be better, I think that following that and having real strong compliance is important. So can you just like speak to that a little bit about just like how you've followed workouts, the mental intention that you've put into doing these on a structure that is totally unfamiliar to you, and how your progress is kind of unlocked from there?
Yeah. So I think as we progressed, really after month one was, and that a lot of that was it took me I think 6 weeks almost to get my bike set up, ready to go, an indoor trainer. Um, Leading up to that, from just merely a swim and a run standpoint, and I was running my Peloton for a little bit. It was very easy for me to piece together what we were building from the start, i.e., the training sessions were rarely longer than 40 minutes to an hour. I didn't necessarily need to plan them into my day, and I was doing them on the fly. And what I learned as we progressed into some of these longer interval trainings was this was not something, if I was going to be successful, that I could just add in on the fly. It wasn't oh, this work day seems light. I think around 2 o'clock I'll have 45 minutes to do my zone two run. It turned into, no, now my run is 60 minutes or 70 minutes. I can't block that off and just hope that something doesn't come onto my calendar. And I did try to get away with that for a little bit in the beginning. And what was happening was I was coming up 5 minutes short on my bike. I was coming up 5 minutes short in my run. And even though the numbers were strong and I felt like, oh yeah, I could do 5 more minutes of this, I learned during the races, 5 minutes is a lot of time. It's a lot of time. And especially at the back end of the 70.3, 5 minutes seemed like 2 hours when I was getting through that last mile. So um, what ended up happening for me was a time shift of, if I want to be serious about this and I want to execute this and get to race day and not have this anxiety of I'm not ready, I needed to make sure I blocked off the appropriate amount of time to execute or communicate with you if I wasn't going to be able to. So for me, what that means is, I have two little kids. Usually 7 a.m. is the wake up every day. Um, Nighttime is my time to just relax, catch up on work. That's not really a training time in my head. I was a little bit of an early riser, but not to the extent that I am now. But I blocked off that, 4 a.m. if it's a long ride, or 5 a.m. if it's a swim or a run, as that's got to be go time and that's me time. And the other good part about that is there's pretty much nothing from a distraction standpoint that's going to set in at those hours for me. Like, short of an emergency at home, I'm running in the neighborhood anyway. I can be right home, but I'm not going to get a work call. I'm not going to get text messages from friends talking about God knows what. It's me time. And then what I started to learn from that as well was I even needed to build in a little bit more time from a preparation standpoint. If it was a bike, um, am I going to get up at 4:30 to build in 30 minutes, or am I going to get up at 4:45 and stay up 15 minutes later prepping all my bottles and what I'm going to have, from a pre-bike meal going in, out the door, or in my case into my garage. It was really vital for me to stop doing it on the fly and just block off a period of time to make sure. And then if there was, I travel sometimes for work or things come up, I would just communicate with you. This day is a challenge, and you were always a wizard about shifting it around, of making sure that I didn't really miss anything, and I kept progressing. And that I think got me to the point where on Saturday I came to the start line and I had no worries whatsoever that I wasn't in a place where I could compete and execute, and it was just on me to get through the day and hope that factors that I couldn't control didn't get in the way.
Sweet. So there are like three things that I'm really hearing there. One is like you really started to play offense against your schedule, right? And get up early and get this shit done so that one, you can complete it, but also two, like it's not taking up headspace and you're not thinking about it all day on when you can piece it in. Um, the other thing was the setup time. So were there any like tactics that you've used to like cut down on how long it takes you to get on the bike or get out the door for a run or organizing your swim shit? Like, do you have an evening protocol if you're going to the swim the next morning, or what's going on kind of in that direction?
Yeah, so what I really nailed down at the end was swim protocol. Was I put my kids to bed, and before I came downstairs, it was a non-negotiable. I went into my bedroom, I got my swim trunks, I got my towel, because those are the only things that I don't keep in my swim bag
Mm.
consistently. And when I came back downstairs to put in bed, they're in my swim bag. So now my swim bag's at the door, ready to go on swim mornings. That's easy for me to just walk out the door. It doesn't matter what I'm wearing because I can change when I get to the pool. On a bike day, I said I did like 95% of my rides on the trainer, so I guess a little bit less getting out the door, but I mean, it takes time to fill bottles, to get the fueling throughout a longer ride. So pretty much all the time I would have those set up on my kitchen counter, filled, or in the fridge filled, everything measured out. The last thing I wanted to be doing is waking up at 4 a.m. and just kind of like blindly pouring infinite in and spilling it all over the place. So pretty much any fueling I always had out the night before. And then on race day, it was no different. It was the night before, like everything was laid out, and then I packed it away accordingly, and it helped with the race. Even though it was a time saving metric and making sure that I was efficient during training, when race time came, it wasn't anything new to me. It was like I was just planning to train the next day, essentially.
Totally. That's beautiful. And then the final thing was your communication on when sessions weren't going to be completed or needed to be moved or we needed to adjust. That is just a really big unlock for people because you basically set the precedent from day one that you're completing everything that is going to be on your plan, right? Like,
Yeah.
is that just how you are as a person, or where was your expectation coming into training and just having essentially 95% plus compliance and essentially 100% compliance if we're considering communication on any maybe one or two sessions that didn't get completed?
Yeah, I think for me personally, and just like doing a self scan of what I'm good at, what I'm not good at. Um, when I have a task oriented list that has been created for me most of the time, not by me. I'm an executor at getting through those things and putting accountability on myself if I'm not going to, and communicating that of, hey, this is like this is on my list. There's a time goal on it, but I'm not going to get it done. So I need to let you know that I'm not going to get it done, and we need to get to the next level of planning, which is what happens if it doesn't get done. Does it get bumped to tomorrow? Do we scratch it? Whatever the case may be. Where I fall short is, and this is why like coaching resonates with me, and why this has been an incredible journey working with you, is I would not be capable, even if you laid it out in in a textbook or whatever it is, and it said exactly what I wouldn't be capable of extrapolating that out and putting it. For me, it's important to be accountable to myself, but also to someone else. So I looked at the sessions as, yeah, I'm letting myself down because I'm not going to be able to execute the goal that I put forth. But I'm also letting Ryan down if I don't do these things, or worse, if occasionally I don't do one of them and I just don't even talk to him about it. And I just, he wakes up the next morning, what the heck? It's red. Like, you just didn't do this yesterday. It's disrespectful. So that's what works for me, is just having that layer of accountability of someone else is also relying upon me executing these tasks. It's about me first and foremost and getting there, but it's also about you as my coach.
Sweet. Yeah, dude. That's just like something that I've definitely seen with people, right? It's like if you have that expectation of compliance, right? It's not that every workout needs to be completed, but there definitely needs to be communication around every workout if you're expecting to excel at this, because there are definitely some people who are in the direction that you are. But also, some people, this is the first time they've ever had coaching, or, oops.
Oh,
National Wireless Emergency Alert System.
this is our 2:18 Eastern. Everyone in the world gets their alert.
Yeah. There you go. Okay. Well, enough of that. And there's just such value in that, because really the number one thing that we need to work on, or not work on, but the number one thing we need to establish is consistency. And if there's not the consistency, and if there's a gap in the communication, it's really challenging to be able to guide an athlete and tell them how they need to progress, because really the way they need to progress is being more consistent and building that foundation. But once that foundation is set, then all of a sudden, like, the progress can come really quickly, the way that we saw with you. So I really want to first just share my screen here and get into your training peaks a little bit, because I think that people will be shocked at the training volume, because it's not anything crazy. It's ultimately not anything crazy. And I'm just going to do a quick, just like for the people that are watching this on a link, or sorry, on YouTube, like, just look at the overall plan. Like, vast majority is green. Occasionally we have a yellow, occasionally an orange, here and there, maybe a red, but like, you're just scrolling up the plan. We're back into April here. That's March. That's before you and I were synced up, but like, that's kind of the secret sauce right there. But let's get into the dashboard and just look at some training metrics. So first thing is that your performance management chart, I love when these align well. The mark here on my map is basically the day that we kicked off, May 1. And we've got just a really great build for you up until, it looks like, I think this was your Olympic, early
Yep.
August, right?
Yep.
So a good little peak there, and then a slight little taper of recovery, and then really a big surge up towards the 70.3. So that's just kind of a good indicator that, hey, you are following the heart rate prescriptions, you are following the interval prescriptions on the bike. So all these data points of run pacing, bike power, heart rate, we don't want to be married to charts like this, but if you're doing what the plan says, it should be trending in the up and to the right. Other thing that's great here is the chart of your heart rate zones. So 44% of the time here in zone 2, 38% of the time in zone 1. So that's like almost to the number on the 80-20 protocol. 15 and change here in zone 3, a little bit in zone 4, nothing in zone 5. Maybe that means that we just should adjust the zones so that you are, it's registering that you're hitting that zone 5, because I know that you are doing that in some sessions. But really the main thing I want to look into here first is duration by swim, bike, run every week. So in the last 90 days, you are averaging 7 hours and 19 minutes of training per week, which is essentially, right, about an hour a day.
Yep.
Now, obviously, we've extended ride duration and you've hit a couple of 4-hour rides. So I'm not trying to say that we're achieving this without intention and without significant time commitment, but I think that the average person, their expectation of what it takes to get down around that 5-hour number, they're probably thinking that it needs to be well over 10, and that's just not the case. I want to go back and actually look at your initial couple of months, because I'm pretty sure that we started you on just like 4 or 5 days of training a week.
Yes.
And really just being patient with the build and giving you a chance to make sure this fits into life. So that's May 1 through July 31st. And that was 553 per week. You can see like a really nice, sexy graph there on the build up from the beginning. But overall, we got you up around to that 6-hour mark and then started to scale it from there. Let's just take a look at the last month to see if we can get a little bit more insight into how you got like dialed up ahead of the race. So race was September 30th. So we'll put the final day there as September 23rd. And then we'll just do August 23rd. Cool. So 8 hours and 6 minutes per week on basically the 5-ish weeks leading into the race. Other things that I want to check in on for you and just sort of like uncover where we found this progress. So I really wanted to make sure that we got you some long rides that really
Yep.
made that 56 feel like light work for you. And so we had you do, let's see, these are like your last ride by ride thing here. So 54.7, I think that's the race. And then you had a 50 miler that you did the weekend before. You had a 62 miler that took 3 hours and 8 minutes. 83 miles took 4 hours and 39 minutes. And then 74 miles, which took 4 hours and 11 minutes. So just speak a little bit on, you didn't own a bike when you got into this in May, and now you're cranking out, 4-hour, 440 trainer rides, getting them done in the morning before your family wakes up, right? You got a 2-year-old and a 5-year-old, you got a wife. So just like speak a little bit about mentally committing to trainer rides of that duration, and also like piecing in, holy shit, I got a 5-hour training session. How's that going to work, right?
Yep. Yeah. So, like you said, originally no bike. Did like the first 2 weeks just kind of on a Peloton. Well, I went to a bike shop. I got fit, waiting for that process to come through and the bike to be completed. Um, and then the first ride I ever did was, I opened the garage, was all ready to go, and it was raining out. First time that I ever even got on the bike to take a ride, and I went out and I did it. I was massively short, I think, on the duration or the time that we'd put aside for that day. But from that moment forward, I kind of committed of, all right, I'll use today as the outlier, but I have to get comfortable being on this thing, and the elements I can't control. So for me, Zwift and working on the trainer inside has been an unlock, just from a standpoint of, like you said, having the little kids. I can't necessarily that early in the morning be far away. Um, I need to
And you
just
live
be a
in
couple
Boston
of foot.
suburbs, right? So like you could be riding outside, but you're not like living out in open country, right?
Correct. It would probably be about 15-20 miles of diciness to get to an area where I felt comfortable and there wasn't someone who, morning coffee looking down was rolling over the top of me after. So, um I think for me, it was helpful in that, like, going out and riding 56 miles in what I thought was like a beautiful setting is a vacation
Yeah, in Muncie in
compared
the racing
to,
league.
yeah, exactly, compared to just, staring at my, 4-panel window in the garage for 4 hours. So um what what I what I kind of found was, um at least for me, mentally got me to the point was, if I cannot, and this will be repetitive in other areas, but it, like, early on with being on the trainer, I definitely found a couple sessions where we started to make that 1 hour to 2 hour jump where I was finishing at like 155. And we talked about that a little bit earlier, but like, it was only 5 minutes. It would still, trip green on training peaks if I wanted the visual effect of it, but I was cheating it, and not necessarily intentionally, but I just wasn't building the time necessary to complete it and have extra time to cool down, stretch. I
Was
was
that
rushing
more
things.
was that more about like you had a tight window and it's like you need to get off because you have family shit, or you're tapping out mentally with 5 minutes to go, just being like, that's good enough?
I think it was a little bit of both. I was using the
Okay.
excuse of having the tight window because at the end of the day, 5 minutes was not the deal breaker on whatever it was. It's 5 minutes, but that was when we were jumping from the 1 to 2 hour mark, and I remember kind of like looking at some of the rides and realizing this isn't gonna cut it when I get into these longer durations. I mean, specifically a full Ironman, this is going to come back to bite me. And if I am not mentally tough enough to stand and bike for 5 more minutes and take it from 1 hour and 55 minutes to 2 hours, it's going to be really hard for me to stay on a bike for almost 3 hours or 6 hours. So that's when I made the commitment that I'm getting on the bike, I'm staying on the bike. And the other thing that, as we got into longer rides, that was really helpful from a trainer standpoint was it allowed me to really tinker with my fueling because it
Mm.
was all right there in front of me versus, putting it in every single pocket on my kit and then going out 20 miles and realizing like I got to find a store now to reload. It was really vital for me to figure out my fueling because I basically had a kitchenette just kind of staring me in the face, and I can pick and prod so that was why it helped for me. I think there was some mental sanity components there, specifically the 4.5 hour ride, which is, it was an 83-mile ride. I was on the trainer the whole time. It's a long time. It's a long time, but
That ride, I want to ask you a question on that, because I think that ride was only prescribed as 4 hours. I think I might have told you to hit 75 miles.
it was 75 miles was the target, and it was 4.5. I think I
Okay,
hit
so
the
you went nine. So
75.
so really, I want to understand. You went 9 minutes long and eight extra and 8 miles longer than just like
Yeah.
what the baseline was. So like, just talk to me about your mindset. Did you just want to push it a little bit more? Did you just have more time and you were grooving? Most people at 4:30, it's like the second that hits 4:30, it's like stop. So I want to hear about that.
Yeah, every ride I found that I did in the longer iterations, those are the ones that I never once fell short on completing to task.
Mm.
It was always the mental battle of 1 hour and then 2 hours versus, hell, I'm on this thing for 3 hours. What does it matter if I'm at an hour and 45 minutes, an hour and 48 minutes? Doesn't matter. I'm still on it for 3 hours. So I think with that ride specifically, um, it was a really long ride. It was actually a brick too. So I had a run coming off, and I just felt like it was a really good chance, not knowing what the coming weeks would be from a training standpoint. It was a really good chance to test myself on, hey, I left it all on the bike and now I got to go run.
Mm-hmm.
So just keep going. 83 sounded like a good place to stop.
Nice.
Um, and then I hopped off, and that was the day that I also learned that um, I'm not always going to feel sunshine and rainbows. That run sucked, and it was only like a 27-minute run, and I was hurting the whole time. So it was a good lesson on fueling on the bike, and it was from a mental standpoint. I get through the 2 hour period, and for me, it's like I'm grooving, I'm good to go. Um, it's often tough staring at the little Zwift guy, but it's worked for me, and it's paid off every single race I've done, taking it into an open concept and kind of getting the enjoyment out of being outside versus like, hey, you're sometimes a prisoner of your own in the garage setup. So it's been really important for me, and that ride specifically is just getting post that 3 hour mark and you feeling good and everything's just aligning. Um, all of a sudden that 30 minutes, which seemed like it took 2 hours from the 1 hour to 2 hour mark, it's gone in 5 minutes. You don't even realize it because you're just cruising.
Nice. So I want to dive in and use this as a chance to talk about your fueling. So before we get to race fueling stuff, I think another huge strength of yours is that you just systematized your pre-training fuel. And I think that you were doing a staple meal before your rides and before runs as well. So just speak a little bit on that. And just like the peace of mind that that probably gave you heading into Muncie, knowing like, hey, I've been doing this. This has just been protocol. Just talking about executing that on some of the trainer stuff and just like the training.
Yeah, so I think the traps that I've fallen into in the past are with anything, right? Like nutrition, diet related. You go on Google, and even if you do it on like a triathlon based, what they'll do is they'll give you, hey, you should get X amount of carbs in, or break it down this way, this many hours before. Um, when I joined on, I hopped on Circle, and you had an outline of just what you did pre-meal before any sort of training, not let alone a race, just training. And so in the beginning, I just copied that verbatim.
Mm-hmm.
I just was like, this is what Ryan eats before he goes out. I'm just going to do that, and then I'll tinker with it from there. So it was really vital for me to have, instead of like, hey, get 75 grams of carbs in and figure it out on your own how to do it. It was
Mm-hmm.
just like, okay, now I took the thought out of it because Ryan has outlined it, and I'll tinker with it as time goes on. And then I didn't mess with it. And I'm a big self-sabotager when it comes to leading up to something big. I change little things. And you did a really good job nailing into my head, like, yeah, don't do that here. There will always be an element of, the proverbial, stuff hits the fan. But um, when it comes to pre-race and leading up to it, like if it works, don't change it. Don't go searching for like a secret formula. So that's what started from a fueling standpoint. I've been a faster coming up to this, so it was even more challenging for me, the concept of just like getting up and eating. But um, it really made such a huge difference in my training output when I really nailed down the fueling, and I could feel it. Like it was power that I knew was there, but I was kind of reaching for it. And then when I got the fueling right, oh, it's there. It is. It was just kind of putting the pieces together.
Sweet. And so to clarify, the meal that you have is basically the Ezekiel bread, banana, honey toast, right? So
Yep.
slice of Ezekiel, some almond butter, banana, drizzle of honey. Anything else that you're having as that
Yeah.
standard?
What I started towards the end was I took the nut butter out, and I still wanted to keep some fats in there, but I wanted to provide more protein. So I took the nut butter out and I backfilled it with eggs. So I upped my calories overall on what it was, but there was a lot more protein in there. And that was kind of like the big switch for me, that at least from a long endurance standpoint was great. Even with my longer runs and my swims, I don't, in the beginning I was fueling for everything. But I kind of never felt like I digested properly coming into those, a lot of times because it was 20 minutes before and not 2 or 3 hours before. So on my rides, I've been very good about the free ride fueling on the training sessions with my runs and my swims. I I generally go a little bit less, a banana with some honey, or in some cases, if the run is like 60 minutes or under, I'll just go fasted on it.
Cool. So to clarify exactly what that pre-ride meal is, it's one slice of the cinnamon raisin Ezekiel bread, a banana, and honey. Are those the only things on it? And then you have 3 eggs, I think.
Yep. Yep.
Okay, cool. So that's just like a great example for people. And we spoke on just the value of adding in the eggs, especially on a race day. I wasn't totally sure that you were doing that before just training rides, but when we're talking about long rides, it's the same principle, right? It's like when we're getting into these 4, 5, 6 hour efforts, it is really valuable. You know, you're a muscular dude, right? And you eat a lot of protein day to day. So having some protein in that first meal is important. And then it sounds like before runs, generally up to an hour, right? And swims, something smaller. You said just banana honey.
Yeah, I'll just throw a banana, some honey on it, and some salt, and just and wolf it down, and I'm out the door, ready to go.
Yeah. And then what about intra training on the bike and the run, as far as like training sessions? Let's
Yep.
get some examples on that.
So, I started with the when we got in those longer ride sessions, 2 hours or more was the first time that I started doing non-infinite fueling on the bike. So
So
even
up
if
to
it's
2 hours, it was basically Ezekiel bread meal before, and then infinite within the training session, and then beyond two
yeah,
hours, you started to use other things on top of infinite.
correct. Mainly because mentally I felt like I needed some sort of solids if the
Mm-hmm.
duration was going to be a long period of time. I had something against, and infinite has worked really well for me, but I just had something against the concept of liquid intake for 3+ hours. So um, I started using the blocks, the Cliff like blocks, and that just like it just didn't work for me. I can't remember how I got them. I think they handed them out at like that swim event that I did, and I grabbed a bunch of them. And you know what? It was my Olympic. They handed out a bunch of them,
Okay.
and so I took them home, and they were tasty. So I just found out that wasn't working for me. So what I started to do was I'd use some gels on runs. I find when I take in gels, I don't have like bad gastro issues. I just like feel like I'm kind of burping it up the whole, it's like having like an antacid or an antacid reflux to it. Like they work for me. I hold down the fuel. It definitely, if there's caffeine in it, works, but it just doesn't. The concept of taking those in on a bike and then having to elongate that ride and then get into a run after, the gels are really a run only thing for me.
Okay.
So what I started to take in was I played with the Bobos bars. Those are pretty heavy. Um, I did, and then the waffles. The waffles for me have been like a game changer. It's a solid. I crammed a ton in when we were in Muncie, into my back pocket just to have extras. Those have been great. I did take a half Bobo's bar in Muncie, and I had some trouble like fishing it out of my kit a little bit just because it's big, and I only had half a bar in there, but still it's a little more robust. But the waffles have been a game changer for me on the bike, to the point where in Muncie, I actually and I don't mean to hop around, but the night before we were shooting messages back and forth, and you kind of gave a last tidbit of fueling ahead if I'm feeling good on the bike. Um, so at that point, I crammed two or three more waffles into my kit or into my setup that I'd put in my kit for the ride, and I went exclusively solids on the bike, um, pretty much right up until like the 2 hour mark, where my original plan was to take in solids for the first hour and that's it, and then switch over to my infinite. So I didn't touch my infinite on the bike until I was at that like 2 hour mark. At that point, I only had about like 40 minutes left of riding before I even got into it, and that was a game changer for me. I think heading into the run, I think otherwise I would have been vastly underfueled and wouldn't have felt as strong.
Yeah, that's great. So you basically did solids between half a Bobo, multiple honey stingers until the 2 hour mark. And then how much infinite did you take in that 2 to 240 mark? Because you finished the bike in just about exactly 240.
Yep. So I had two servings. So it's about 600. Those two servings are about 600 calories total. I think it's 75 grams of carbs in each serving. So I took that almost all of that in at the end. What I felt I was cramping a little bit towards the end of the bike on my left quad. Um, and I didn't finish up the infinite. I grabbed like a Gatorade just because I felt like it was going to have the most amount of sodium crap, everything in it to try and flush out some of that cramping, and it loosened up when I got into the run. So that was the only reason why I probably didn't deplete the source that I had, just because I took something else onto the bike with me.
Yeah, that's big time. That's a lot of calories to take in that relatively short window. So do you know, we'll get into some numbers here. Do you know exactly, you said you had half a Bobo, which the Bobo full bars are 340, I think. So
Yeah,
170 about if you had half a Bobo. And then how many stingers did you have?
I had 3 stingers.
And the stingers are all 150 each, right?
Yeah, 140, 150.
Okay, so three of those is 450 total calories, plus 170 is 550 to then 620. So you basically had 620 calories from the start to the hour 2 mark. And then
Yep.
from 2 to 240, you had another 600. I didn't quite realize that. That's big time. And that clearly fueled you for the run because you ran real well and you felt good basically getting through the first couple of miles of having just pushed hard on the bike, but you
Yeah,
settled in well. You said around mile 5 or so.
the run right off the bike. So I my left quad cramped on the bike, and then I got off the bike and I started the run, and my right quad cramped almost immediately. And then there were two things going on in my head. One was, uh, shit, I'm cramping on both sides, and I kind of need like those two legs. And then the other thing in my head was don't go out too fast. But I also, you know, right or wrong in my head, I was like, if I slow down, is that going, am I flushing out the cramping by keeping this pace? So I ran my first mile, I think, in 7.5, which was well below what I wanted my race pace to be. My race pace I wanted to be around 750 in my head, and I torched the first mile at like 7.5. Um, then I came back to earth a little bit, and then I think I ran another sub 8, and then I just kind of fell off a cliff a little bit after that. Not a huge cliff, but luckily that's also when the cramping went away. So it was almost like by slowing down, it was like a perfect sequence of events where I think my fueling from the bike at the back end caught up with me and got me kind of functioning how I needed to function again. And I just fell into a really nice rhythm, um, which this is probably the only part of the race I was a little bummed out about. But keeping in mind that I didn't come into the run like I've ever ran before, which is usually I come into a run and I feel good from the get go. And this is the longest run I've actually ever done in my life. I've never run 13 miles before. So this is the first time I'm ever doing it. And from the get go, both my quads are cramping pretty bad. So the disappointment I kind of threw out the window as a standpoint of, hey, I'm in survival mode at this point. Let's get through it. So it was really like the first 5 miles, there's just all sorts of things going on. And then from mile 5 to really like mile 9, I was on such cruise control. I passed a lot of the guys coming the other way at that point, which was huge, just mentally to like, fist bump or high five. And then I felt really good until mile 9. And then mile 9, at that point, I was like, well, I don't feel great, but it's non-negotiable. I'm getting through it at this point. So that's kind of where the fight began. But yeah, it was, I don't know if the cramping was caused by maybe overfueling a little bit, or if the cramping went away by overfueling. I don't know. I'll give way to your tutelage on that one.
Yeah, I would say that the fueling definitely I would assume helped the cramping. Usually overfueling can cause some gut stuff, like if there is an issue with it. But everything that you're saying, It sounds like you're in the last couple miles of a 78.3.
Yeah. I did at the beginning of the run. I took in 2 gels um to get going that had some caffeine, and I was burping pretty regularly come mile 2, and I abandoned my gel plan. And at the aid stations, I was taking in water, and occasionally I'd take in a little bit of Gatorade. And at the halfway mark, I just kind of I went off script and I grabbed a Martin 100 caffeine gel.
Yep.
Had never taken one of those down before. I was a little taken aback by the substance of it, but that was the only fueling that I really took in out on the run outside of just an occasional sip of Gatorade. Everything else, it just kind of ran its course.
Yeah, that's big time. So looking at some of your splits here, so it's cool, dude. I mean, you can see you were really earning it on this back half. Final 2 miles, 8:41, 8:42. And overall, like it looks like a super, super strongly held effort. That was how I would describe this. Your heart rate average for the first half is 157, and for the second half, it was 159. So your body is basically at a really steady state of output. And you can see that you held on well. Your cadence on this first half is 179, and it dropped to 175 average. So when we think about developing you and how to just give you, the most value out of your experience here, like really looking to maintain form on the back half of these types of runs, not letting the cadence dip, 4 strides per minute. It's not a crazy amount. But that's something that, like, as we think about you maintaining form under fatigue, that's something that we can definitely prioritize. I want to bounce back to lay out your experience in running before we synced up, and then really just like how you developed as a swimmer and a biker. First, just chat on like the running. I think that you did a 10K shortly before we started, and that was a little bit of a baseline. I was trying to find that on the plan, but I didn't see that. Do you know what day that was?
Yeah, it was maybe like 2 weeks before or maybe a week before we started.
Oh, here we go. 6.28 miles, right?
Yep.
Yeah. So you ran this at 7:41. So just for like laying the ground expectation, like you to me kind of fit into the similar to the demographic that I came into triathlon with, like ability to run consistently under sub 8-minute miles if you're hauling ass, and most runs generally hauling ass and not really running slow ever, right? So does that sort of describe where you were at?
Yeah, that's a perfect description. So my run program, which was self coached and created by yours truly, pretty much consisted of hey, I have this X amount of time to run. It wasn't even planned on how long, it's just this is the amount of time I have to run today. So I'm going to run as fast as I can, and therefore as far as I can in that period of time. And my goals were making sure that my average mile time was less than the day before, or the 2 days before, whatever the case may be. And so what came of that was a lot of great running days, and then a lot of small, occasional injuries from overuse and everything in between. So this 10K was a good example where, I crossed the finish line in a full sprint, ready to keel over and like pass out at the end, and I jacked up my IT band pretty good on it, and I walked away from the day feeling like I was king because I ran a sub 8s the whole time, and it was awesome. And I had friends and family there, and they thought it was cool too. But there was no sustainability in it. If I had to run a 6.5 more miles after this, that I wouldn't. It'd be a DNF, or slow it down to like 14-minute miles at the end. So that was my running protocol coming in, was just get out there and run fast. Zone. I don't know what zones are. I don't know where I am. You look at my heart rate on this one. I think I was up like 180s, 190 at certain points. So
Yeah. So ability to run, but no real run direction. So talk about some swim development and cycling. Like you seem to be somebody that like you must have paid attention to doing the drills and following the cadence work on the bike, and just speak to those a little bit on how you developed rather than just trying to push your distance, because we just saw in the group chat, the tribal chat yesterday, Brandon was commenting on the drills and how in the past he's skipped out on them sometimes, and somebody else was commenting on how they had the perception of, oh well, I don't need the drills. I just need to be able to push my distance more. That's what I need to focus on now. Whereas swimming is a totally technical sport. And so the drills are helping you not break down as much, right? And there are things we can chat on cycling cadence, but just like speak to those types of drill intentions on the swim and the bike and how they helped you.
Yeah, I mean, for starters, like guilty on early on, like this swim is shorter than the swim last week. That's it needs to be longer than the swim last week. I need to learn how to swim further and longer. I can't be going backwards. And that was short-lived from a standpoint of I realized there was no improvement. So two things. My first experience with swimming in a pool, like the very first pool workout that we did, I didn't get through it because I just couldn't regulate my breathing. I think I did 2 laps at what I thought at the time was like a Michael Phelps pace, and then like I was dead. I just like I thought that the 18-year-old like lifeguard was gonna have to come in and save me. So um, I basically just I like kind of steadied myself and swam as long as I could and slowed myself down. But it was like a big humbling experience for someone who grew up on the East Coast, spent summers on the Cape. Like I've been around water my whole life. I fancied myself a good swimmer. I was a lifeguard, all these things. Um, Getting in the pool that first time was big time humbling. And then my first try, the sprint, um, at the end of that day, I was hooked. At the beginning of that day, it was a 400-yard swim. That's it, 400 yards. And about 70 to 80 yards into the swim, I remember thinking, I hate this. I don't want to do this anymore. I don't know what the hell I was thinking, even thinking of an Ironman, forget that. Like, I don't want to do this. Um, I couldn't figure out my breathing. People were hitting me. It was a mess. So um, swim for me was something that I think coming in, I was so fixated on the bike, and I've never ridden a bike, and I'm not a cyclist, and I see these people out doing it all the time. Swim will be easy. I'll swim. I've swam my whole life. Um, it was a combination of humbling myself, and then Keith took some film of himself swimming, which you kind of broke down for the group in circle, and that was a really good um, chance for me to not watch a YouTube video where it's a professional swimmer showing you what to do. And not that Keith isn't the ultimate badass professional, but it was someone on my level of like, hey, they're trying to figure it out like I am, and there's realness to this. Watching that and thinking of over the barrel and just thumb to thigh, like those little things allowed me to progress and figure out where what was going to work for my breathing patterns. And I kind of focused all along on, I think I have an okay form. I would rather perfect my breathing before I get into swimming faster. I just need to be able to swim the whole length and not feel like I'm going to go into cardiac arrest rather than swim as fast as I can. And what happened was I just started getting faster by default because I'd figured my breathing out. And just to kind of fast forward to the race itself, it was the first time that I've lined up at any of the events. I told you the sprint was a disaster from a swim standpoint. The mile swim I did that you talked about earlier was I got through it. And it was a big breakthrough moment for me because I needed to show myself that I could swim a mile continuously in a non-pool setting without holding on to anything. Um, it still wasn't the most fun experience for me. And my Olympic was my first swim in a wetsuit in a competitive environment. And it was great to have the comfort of having a wetsuit on and that additional buoyancy, but I wasn't confident. I just kind of like, and I had a good time and I did well, but there's something about enjoyment in the moment that I didn't have in my Olympic in the swim. It was euphoric after the case, but during it was like too much thought on breathing and am I doing this right? And my sightings all over the place. So Muncie was the first time that I truly, there were butterflies, but it was about the event in the entire day and not, oh my God, I'm going to jump in the water and then what's going to happen? I mean, in 100 yards, I'm not going to be able to breathe. It was so sustainable throughout. I felt when I got out of the water that maybe even there was a little bit that I held back that I could have put forth, but I feel like that was a positive for me versus getting out of the water and going, "Oh my God, I can't believe I survived." And that was huge for me. So I think for me, the progression of swimming was really focusing in on getting my breath work and then using the drills to mindlessly get faster, if that makes sense. The drills for me weren't necessarily things that I remembered. I think it was just the muscle memory. And it almost helped that I was focused on my breathing in the early parts because the drills helped. It was kind of an excuse to dumb down the thought of this 1.2 mile swim and more focus on just get the technique down. Once you have
Hmm.
the technique down, it's I'm sure the fast swimmers will tell you, yeah, this is the easiest part of the Ironman for me. I'm just breathing and moving my arms in the water. I don't have to deal with my tire blowing out or my body shutting down because I've been out here for 5.5, 6 hours. So I think it was just it was breath work first and foremost, and then yeah, to go back to the drills, like I think I thought I was a strong swimmer, and I'm sure to a certain extent I was, but my form was crap. And you do the drills, and you start to realize weeks later, oh, this is kind of this is what I practiced. Oh yeah, like it's that aha moment goes off.
Sweet. So you had experience in open, just like beach swimming type of stuff,
Yeah,
right? Yeah.
yeah.
So
Jumping
not
off a
pool
boat
swimming
with
like this at
buddies
all,
and
and not swimming
staying.
for distance.
Yeah, jumping off a boat, being like, whoever can make it over there and back fastest wins. And
Yeah.
so yeah, you win one of those, and you think you could go to the Olympics if you need to. And I think the other cool part for me was the only concept of swimming I really have outside of like beach swimming is everybody tunes in for the Olympics and watching,
Yeah.
and like you see those guys and they're all 6 foot whatever and they like massive wingspan. So to get through the mental aspect of like I'm not built like a swimmer
Hmm.
was also key because sure, I'm sure there's some physical limitations that will probably stop me from ending up on the U.S. swim team, but it doesn't stop me from completing. It certainly doesn't stop me from completing a 70.3, and it won't from 146. And I feel confident now in it, and that was something that didn't come day one, and it had every bit to do with the drills, the breath work, and you do have to believe in yourself at a certain point, and there are moments to panic. uh, I got whacked pretty good in the sprint, and that sent me into a tailspin. And I learned from that. It was kind of I'm glad it happened there and didn't happen, in the Olympic when I had so much more distance. But just lining up in Muncie, knowing I'm anxious and excited about the day and not just the swim was huge. It was huge.
Nice. You have a couple minutes to go beyond the hour mark here.
Yeah, of course.
Okay, cool. So I want to just hear your perspective on your bike development because 21 miles, you didn't own a bike basically 4 months ago, and you did 21 miles an hour for a 70.3. So that's just freaking fabulous. So just speak a bit on that. What do you feel the unlocks were? You clearly followed the interval prescriptions and clearly did the cadence variation. So yeah, what do you got there?
So I think a couple big breakthroughs on the bike. Um, Getting a bike for me was like anytime you get something new, it's just really exciting. So of all the sports, right, in triathlon, the bike is like the only physical. You can get new running shoes or you can get like some goggles, but like or new wetsuit, but like the bike is kind of like that's your baby, right? So that's like that's your horse that you're riding, and it's the longest period that you're gonna spend on anything. So like the process of getting my first bike was like it was just incredible, and it added in the fuel to like my fire of this sport. And I was sending you messages last night. I'm already looking at like triathlon bikes because it's just like it's so meaningful to me now, and like what you can do on them. So getting the bike was vital for me in terms of I think it helped me not having experience because it gave me that burning desire of like, this is new to me and I want to use it. All I want to do is use it versus maybe if I was a leisurely, like I biked every once in a while, I had to dust it off. It wouldn't have had that like that new car smell to me of like, I just want to get in and drive. I don't even have anywhere to go. I want to get in and drive. So that was huge. And then I think I was quickly humbled, and I talk about this a lot, but like I'm on like a life's journey of just like humbling. Like I love being humbled. I love it because it keeps you on edge. You don't want to be the know-it-all. You don't want to be the person that's got it all figured out. Like you just get better. And having the bike and the swim as components of like, man, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm getting, I went to that sprint and there were people just smoking by me, and it's like I'm in better shape than that person, or I like what's going on, like why can't I do, and it's an art to it. So I think for me the bike has been a continuous build of like I know that there's more to unlock, and it's been exciting to get to that point. And then I think a lull that I fell into a little bit during training was I got comfortable on the bike, but I literally got like too comfortable where I was piecing together the rides, but I don't think my efforts were where they needed to be. And so leading up um to the
Hold on,
Olympic,
I want to check on that. So if I'm remembering now, I think was there a point with you a couple months in where I basically had to give you permission to push harder? Did that happen with you?
yeah, so it was leading up to the Olympic, and I had kind of just, I was checking the boxes. I was getting the rides and I was getting the distances, and not that Swift is a good indicator of speed, but like yeah, they were okay. But um, I was getting off the bike and I wasn't exactly like tapped out, and but I felt like it was like that was just a good aerobic workout for me.
Mm-hmm.
And leading up to the Olympic, I remember, we talked about the goals for each session, and the Olympic, with the sprint, it was like, the bike is like just be strong on the bike. With the Olympic, the goal was like just let it fly. Like this is a good event for you to let it fly. And there was two reasons. One was leading up to that point, probably like 2 weeks prior, we established let's push it on the bike. Like if you feel strong, you don't have to just stay at this pace. Like you can ride faster. Um, and the other part was it was a 4 loop track. So the idea was you need to let it fly because by loop 3, you're probably going to have virtually everyone that's doing the thing on the same road with you. So you need to make up as much time prior to all these people pummeling onto the course.
As the course fills up more from people who started to swim later
Yeah.
than you, they're getting on the bike course. Yeah.
Yeah. And that actually helped a lot in Muncie because it was a 2 loop where I think I would have been, not that it was like overly crowded, but I think I would have been a little more freaked out if I hadn't done the 4 loop. When I got in that second loop on the course and it was a lot more crowded and I was doing a lot more passing. Um, but so yeah, with the bike, like coming to that Olympic, we had that conversation of like, if you got more, just like what's holding you back? And there was no good answer for it. So, really ramping up to the 70.3, I found new levels of power. And I think even like the week or 2 weeks prior to the taper, I was putting in like some serious like wattage performances that I hadn't the whole time. Like I was really ramping it up. Um, and I think part of it was the effort wasn't max the whole time, but also it was part of the building through the process. Like I was just getting more and more comfortable, and so it really it was just a culmination of a couple different events of like really getting comfortable on the bike. And once I was comfortable, not letting that comfort seep into my efforts. And it happened for a little while. I fell into that gap of cool, I'm really comfortable being on a bike for 2 hours now. And if I just kind of lollygag at this pace, I can be on the bike for 3 hours or 4 hours, and then I'll be off the bike and on the run. And I think the other thing that you talked about was the power of like when you're breaking down an endurance event, like you owe it to yourself to be fastest on the bike because that's where you're going to make or lose the most amount of time. It's the longest period that you're on a piece of equipment. It's the fastest that you're going. Simple mathematics will tell you that's like where you're going to PR and where you're not going to PR. So yeah, in the swim you could be slow, but you may only be like 5 minutes slow, and that's monumental from a pace in the swim, but it's not when you extrapolate it out over 5 hours and 15 minutes. So um, all those things resonated with me to get me to a point on the bike where I went from a true rookie to an amateur that just kind of was like, cool, I can ride a bike now for an extended period of time and I won't wake up the next morning and, not be able to sit on the toilet. To then going, okay, I owe it to myself to tap into that next gear. So, I mean, you're to thank for that. And kind of, we all picked up on it throughout the process.
Yeah, it looks like this ride specifically, this September 20th ride. I threw a couple of these ERG rides at you where,
Yeah.
Wahoo and Zwift are tracking your power output, right? And they're setting an FTP for you. And so this structure of a ride basically just capitalizes on putting you at exact percentages of your functional power threshold,
Yep.
functional threshold power. And so like this ride, like you can see, you had your 5 minute power peak, 10 minute, 20 minute, 60 minute, bunch of heart rate peaks as well. So you were clearly working hard for this. But that to me, like that was a cool unlock to also see as a coach because, a handful of the people that I work with, they have like the most basic trainers that don't even have power on them or don't have ERG mode, or just like that's not where they're at just yet. So to kind of find that unlock with you was really big time. And I mean, dude, 21 miles an hour, you got a bike 4 months ago. Like that's so big time.
Yeah, I will say without like I agree that that was the unlock piece for me from a power standpoint is realizing that I was never totally data driven, but I looked, at the end you see where your caps are from a power output standpoint. And that was the day when I got off and I looked at my ride recap and I'm getting the ribbons on every single one of the power outputs. And it's like I can ride at 240 watts for 20 minutes. Like I can do it. Sucked, but I can do that versus before I'm like, yeah, I'm going to do that when I'm going up an incline and, when I'm really hammering it on a straightaway or whatever it may be. But like otherwise, so it was good for me to see like I can do that. I can be okay and I can recover from that. And that was huge. That was huge for me.
Nice, dude. I love it. Let's wrap here with you just chatting on like just the experience of Muncie. That was the first race that we had really pieced together as like a full team race like that. We had the Ironman Florida event last year, of course. But that was a little bit organized by just like people who were already signed up. And this was the first tribal training race where we really had people that were directed towards that as being part of the squad. So just speak on that whole experience and being there with people.
Yeah, I mean, to start, it was for me incredibly vital. My sprint, my wife was there. My Olympic, my whole family was at the finish line. It was awesome. My little girls were there. Um, I was big time jealous of Logan having his whole family and his girls crossing the finish line. But in lieu of that, like having the team there, especially on the back end of the run, it's honestly what got me across the finish line. Or any doubts that were there, um, to give you like kind of my visual on the run, um, you don't know where you are in the course on the bike because it's two loops, and I don't know if I missed someone the first loop and if they're ahead of me, behind me. But on the run, what I noticed going out was specifically around that like mile 3, mile 4 is when the leader came by really early, but or he may have already come through. But you start seeing a couple runners come through, and they're clearly like the elite runners. But what I noticed after maybe the first pack of 10 or 15 was the runners that were passing going the other way, they were just in like they had pain on their face, and then I saw a couple that had stopped and walked. So obviously they just something was going on, and there were a couple that were yakking. Um, so, but I didn't see any of the tribal guys when I made the turn, and I kind of at that moment realized like I think I'm kind of out ahead here. Um, So two things I did on the back end was one, I was like, I need to make the mental commitment when I pass one of the tribal guys going back. I don't want to have the pain on my face, even if I'm miserable, that I saw coming out. Cause it sucked. I saw some of these guys coming back and I did quick math in my head and realized I don't feel good and I have like 6 miles to get to where they are. So that was goal number one. And then goal number two, like, was just along those lines, like be in a good place. And it helped me just as much, like just seeing those guys every like spaced out every 1 or 2 miles and then catching you on the bike at the end, like that was what did it for me in the dark days of that mile, like 7, 8, 9 and beyond. And then just the other really cool part about having the team there was I think something that I've battled with from a pre-race standpoint, and I it almost bit me a little bit this time around, but my first two races I got there really early to transition area, and um, I'm not against getting up early, but I don't necessarily need to put myself in the race environment. I'm not good in a scenario where all I can think about is the race.
Chilling for 3 hours in transition before the race start. Yeah.
I can't do it. And I know there's a lot, like, I think there's a lot of people that could do it and like they thrive off that atmosphere. It gives me anxiety. I like to get into a place, have some buffer of time, but also like I can get in, I can mean business, I can get through. Um, I was leaving transition. First of all, there was some traffic getting there, so that kind of threw me for a loop. And then as I was about to, I had um half my swims or swimsuit on, and I was walking down to the swim start, and the guy in the rack next to me was like, "Hey, can you put air in my tire?" Because I had my bike pump, and I almost had a heart attack. It's like I'm not gonna say no, but like I got my schedule all lined up here. So I think for me to quell some of that anxiety, just to go to the swim start, and then all of a sudden there's 8 people there that I can just like talk BS with, and it's not a total stranger. We have something in common that we already know about was huge for me getting in that swim start line because I just calmed myself of a level of like, yeah, we were talking about BS and I don't even remember half the stuff, but it wasn't like outside of a couple race related things. Like it was just, hey, how you doing? Where are you from? Like just to have that community with a built-in something in common versus tapping the guy next to me who I don't know. And yeah, most of the people are nice, but you tap the wrong person, they're like, leave me alone. And just to have that around and know that was encompassing throughout the entire race, seeing you out on the course, getting shout outs about tribal training from people that weren't racing but clearly knew who it was, what it was all about. That was such a game changer. So getting me through the race, the pre-race, getting through it, calming the nerves before, and then at the end, I mean, just being under the tent and like having a whole tent full of dudes with finisher medals on that like I literally met all of them that morning with the exception of Logan who I met the day before at the pre-swim, like just like best of friends because you're out, you're riding a high. You're talking about, you're just riffing on things that went well, didn't go well, how you rode through it. Like that was really cool. That was really cool. And I think I would have had the high finishing the race, but then what? I mean, I like, I could FaceTime my family and they were incredibly proud and it was exciting to talk to them. My daughter said, "Did you win?" And I said, "No." And she goes, "Oh." um, so it was those components, but just having that like camaraderie environment. I mean, that was incredible. And I know it's not always aligns with everyone to do the same race at the same time. Life happens, but I can't. I think it would be more of a challenge to race in an environment where it's just me versus having a team of individuals that even I met that very morning. Because I mean, it was quick friends and then quick celebration after.
Yeah, that's really cool, dude. It was awesome to get together before the swim. We did not do that at Ironman Florida. It was a little bit more chaotic. So that'll definitely be a new protocol moving forward. But yeah, man, thanks for being part of the experience and leading from the front. and just pouring yourself into this and giving us your all and inspiring so many people on the squad.
Of course, man. I mean, it's been incredible, and this is just the beginning. This is just the
Just the
beginning.
beginning,
So
dude.
I'm
We're
pumped.
charging on from here.
I'm pumped. Let's roll.
Yeah, sweet, dude. Well, my computer's about to die and my charger's inside, so I'm gonna wrap this and we'll get this shared out in line for the team. Thank you so much for being a part of this. This is the first, I'm calling these hot seats now, where I'm sitting in with one guy and we're just diving into what's cooking. So thanks for being a
All
part of
right.
the first one
That's
here.
where my seat's burning up. I'm ready.
Yeah. There you go, dude. Well, you're part of the flame too, so good job.
Ryan, pleasure, man. Thank you for everything.
Yeah, absolutely, dude. I'll talk to you soon.
Take care.
Later.